All right, everybody. I see the chat's already going. My name's Mitch Daugherty. I am the director of Built Oregon, and we'd like to welcome you to another one of our virtual discussions. Today, well, real quick, some housekeeping. The chat is live over there. Feel free to talk amongst, and then more important, down here, you can click the Ask a Question. You can add a question, you can upvote questions. We're really going to kind of like dive into kind of the topics that you want us to talk about through this. But as we kind of like kick this thing off, I just want to say that this is one of the topics, mental health, that from the Built Oregon perspective, we've kind of instilled in everything we do. Founders in general tend to be super lonely and super stressed about everything, and they don't have like that feeling of transparency or relationship building with people that they can talk to. So the thing that we want to emphasize here is that this is an open discussion with people who are founders, passionate about the startup ecosystem, but we're not medical professionals. So some of the advice that we're giving you is more of our thoughts, our core beliefs and stuff like that. So I'd like to start off because I'm humbled to have this panel that we have lined up here with some intros, and we'll Yaraj on soon. I think Rick, our IT expert, is working to get her on the screen, but we'll just start it with Jason. Why don't you kind of quick intro?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I'm very passionate about the topic of mental health, and I'm excited to share what I've learned over the years as a founder. I'm the founder and CEO of Revent Optics. We're based in the Central East Side here in Portland. We make and sell replacement lenses for eyewear, both sunglasses and prescription. And we have about 50,000 products just to get a scale of what we do. We're all direct to consumer. We manufacture roughly 60% of those products now here in Portland on demand. We're super excited to be here, and I moved the company up here about maybe now 5 years ago from Eugene, 6 years ago actually. Love being involved with Built. Mitch and I were on the OEN, Oregon Entrepreneurs Network board together, and I've been a big fan of yours, Mitch, ever since. And so again, just excited to be here and share some knowledge. Anything else you want from me?
No, I think
I like surfing and mountain biking.
Anthony.
Cool. Grateful to be here. I'm actually new to Portland. For the last 5 years, I've lived in a distributed lifestyle in about 6 different cities, and have run a company called Aware Catalysts. And more recently, one of the, brands underneath that is Founder Mental Wealth. So focused on helping founders, and I use that term as anyone who starts a business and get paid money for the value they provide, and helping them understand the connection between their mental wealth, which is different than the polar opposite of mental illness, and the connection between that, the business you decide to form, the company culture that you create, and how you grow and how you end or close your businesses.
Cool. Before we kind of dive into the questions, I want to just kind of circle back on some of the stuff we talked about before going live here. One of the things that I've seen over the past 2 months that's kind of been accelerated because of this COVID is this sense of isolation. And what that is doing, at least from the founders that I talk to and that I meet, is they don't have that peer-to-peer in-person connection. And so they don't have that ability to go and just hang out and download over a drink or a coffee or whatever. And so I just kind of wanted to get your sense of, one, kind of how, as founders yourself, you're dealing with that social isolation and a lot of the stuff.
Yes, there we go. Hey!
Mental health.
Yes. Perfect timing, right in for the intro, your intro, and
exactly.
I apologize, and I heard most of everything so far.
Thank you, Rick, IT expert. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, since everybody's already done that.
He's here. I am Ciara Pressler. I have a company called Pregame, and it was based in part actually on some mental health care models, which I can talk about later. But we do business coaching and classes in small groups.
Awesome. So going back to that question that I had just now, I don't know if you heard it, Ciara, but really around that social isolation that's kind of been accelerated over the past 2 months. So I'd like to just kind of start the conversation with, one, how all of you as founders yourself and running businesses are kind of dealing with that, and then also what you're seeing from other founders that you talk to when it comes to that social isolation. I'll start with
honestly, for myself, this is just, it's not that different. It's like I have some unique advantages that are also disadvantages. I run my business by myself. I don't have a partner. So I'm kind of used to doing things mostly by myself. And then, I have contractors, but I don't have like a full-time team. So it's not that different. I do miss my hugs. I get a lot of hugs from my client, and my business model is very much an in-person business model on purpose. And so having to rethink that is a little, it's an uphill. But my COVID problems have been my normal life problems, quite honestly. Just, a remix of them. A lot of my normal life problems have gone away too, which has made me happier in some ways during COVID. I have a lot of FOMO. And I always like when we're trying to hustle and build our businesses, there's so many events to go to, and it's so hard to go to all of them. And I get really exhausted by that. And it's easier for me to dial in from home. Or we have the perfect excuse right now to not go. So I don't feel like everyone's out there doing stuff without me, which is usually what bothers me. So that's helpful. And it's been easier to network authentically.
Interesting. How about you, Jason?
Yeah, I think it's really evolved for me over the last however long we've been in social isolation. I think initially it was a big shock. I mean, I'm lucky in that my wife's here. We had just picked up a puppy from the Humane Society like 2 months prior, so we really had I think a relatively good setup compared to others that may be in like a 700 square foot apartment on their own downtown. I have friends that are having to deal with that as well, but I'm a very social person by nature. I think half the reason I started a company was just so I could have people around me that I really like, and so that aspect of like not being able to go to the office and be around them and the energy that comes from that, I started to miss almost right away. And one thing I did that kind of helped with that, I posted on LinkedIn, like, hey, if you want 10 minutes just to chat about anything really, shoot me a note. And that was really interesting right out of the gate. I actually got a lot of responses from that and ended up making some connections. A few of them are actually, I think, on this panel here, or on the, listening in. So that helped quite a bit. We're doing a lot of Zoom calls as a team. So, we're doing, early this morning, we had our coffee check-in, which is like you kind of randomize who you meet with, and we all get on a Google call there and or meetup and just talk about whatever and drink coffee for 15 minutes. We've been doing like weekly lunches on, with no real topic, but we do updates like we normally would on Fridays. So we're trying to keep some sense of normalcy in this situation and try to keep the connection points. And in some ways, I think it's been successful. But individually, people struggle. You have varying sort of degrees of loneliness and situations that people are in. So just trying to be really in tune with that as the CEO too, of like, talking about it openly with the team and saying, I'm sure a lot of you are feeling isolated, lonely, worried, scared. You know, the range of emotions that we've gone through over the last 2 months is sort of a wider spectrum than I've ever experienced in this short of a time. So I think what's really helped too is just normalizing that by saying that is the reality. This is unprecedented. Like, it's worldwide, it's global, and we're trying to navigate this in the best way we know how, personally and professionally. And I think in part that helps create shared connection, at least amongst our team. We're like, yeah, that is true. And regardless of where you live and how you live, like, we're all feeling the same range of emotions to varying degrees. So that's been good. And then, yeah, just going out on walks frequently. I ride my bike a lot. So, I'm not near people, but you actually see people other than, I love my wife, but, day in and day out. And then the dog's great too, but just getting out and like seeing people out there has helped quite a bit. So those are some of the things that we've done.
Cool.
Yeah.
And Anthony, you've been talking about this mental health and stuff like that since you kind of got involved in the Portland Twitter streams and all that stuff.
Yeah. Interesting enough, like, I've been on this, I think my own personal evolution of mental health and mental wealth for like the last 10 years, since I had a like major breakdown back in, oh my gosh, it's like 2010. But this specifically, it didn't impact a lot of my day-to-day because like the last 5 years I've been either living in an Airbnb or like short-term rentals or all this stuff. So it hasn't, like, the being alone part of it hasn't bothered me much. But like Ciara, she was talking about, the hugs and that whole human connection for me. I'm like my business usually is either speaking or workshops and stuff like that. And so missing that piece weighed heavily on me. So really, like, the first week or 2 weeks, Trader Joe's, chocolate covered sea salt almonds, chips, eating, Netflix. I just gave myself the space to just be a hot mess. And interesting enough, when I did that, I actually got more business, which is weird. But I allowed myself to be a hot mess to let my brain process everything. And then I gave myself kind of this grounding rod of thinking of this whole thing of like living through 3 contexts, the pre-COVID, now we're in the pandemic, and then there's going to be a post-pandemic. I knew what to do in the first context. Now I'm messily finding my way through and giving myself the grace and compassion to just work through it. And then realizing that nobody has the answer. There is no silver bullets or pills or whatever to get through this all. And so, yeah, I think the other kind of tangible thing I did was make sure I connect with community. So like, I got a Ethels Club, had a digital community. And so I did those things to kind of still give me the sense of being connected, but without the physical connection.
Yeah. It's interesting, like the COVID, for all the horrible stuff that it's creating, whether it's emotional, economic, financial, and stuff like that, it's almost like also created almost like this pause in everything we were doing in a weird way. And so one of the things that I've been kind of thinking about over the past like week or two is this term like toxic positivity. And like it's like one of those things where I think I've seen it over the past 5-10 years working with startup, where every startup founder that I know has to always be positive. They can never let their guard down and show any emotion, the failings or something like that, whether they're looking for money or not. And so I'm just kind of going to throw that out there to the 3 of you for, like, is this a chance to kind of reset some of that? Because everybody is now kind of isolated. There is that empathy. Everybody's going through similar struggles, no matter who you are, around always having to be on top and I'm killing it, when in reality, you're killing yourself. I'll talk with Ciara.
I kind of wish I weren't on this panel because I have so many things to say about this that I will be so dissatisfied with anything I get out. Like everything you say, I'm like, oh yeah, I have a whole essay on that. What was the question? It's also Friday, so I have no sensor left, which is part of the Zoom fatigue, that we're all going through.
I think it's more of like, we have an opportunity now to reset. Like that whole that super fast running of startup founder ecosystem is now kind of slow. Yeah. And so is there a chance to reset that mentality?
Well, there's a chance if you take it, like anything, right? Like I keep using this metaphor that it's like two trains passing, like in an action movie, and then like the action hero has like one sliver to like jump from one train to the other, and like we can choose to take this opportunity to like reset if we make that jump, but like that opportunity is going to pass, and you only get so many opportunities in life, as in business. I think that being like optimistic to a fault is a big danger in business, but that's culturally not the case in Portland. I think that's maybe more West Coast specific to be, relentlessly positive. I find more of my clients who are founders on the West Coast tend to be like that and worry about vulnerability and worry about that, whereas people are just more like facts, let's go hustle on the East Coast. And that's just where I spent most of my professional career, so that's more my style as well. So which one's right? Neither, both, but I do think it's a great time to figure out, fix your model. I've had more inquiries from people who like finally want to do their brand, finally want to do their comm strategy. And that's a great thing to do, or do some sort of adjustment. It's a great time to throw things out that aren't working. It's a great time to try stuff without it having to be perfect. But it's also a great time to like stop if you're not enjoying it. And I always say like entrepreneurship is not sacred. I disagree with some of the leaders around town about that. I don't think founders are special. I think everyone's special, and being a founder is to some degree a privilege, right? Like we have the ability and the space and the time and the support to do something extraordinary, and that's quite a privilege, and I'm so grateful for it. But if you have kids right now and you need to be home for that, like if you have other demands on your life because of your other life goals that are important to you as well, it's okay to readjust that. Like we're going into an entirely new world. So I just think it's a good time to think again about what's actually important to you and what you need in this moment.
Yeah. Jason?
Yeah, I agree with almost all that. I did have one question, though, just your comment about the West Coast versus the East Coast. Is that, I guess, were you saying that the West Coast is more relentlessly optimistic, or they're more vocal about sort of the downsides of entrepreneurship?
No, West Coast is way more optimistic. I think West Coast cares a lot more about like your workplace happiness quotient and like the founders being vulnerable and like all the emotional side of it, which can be great, also be counterproductive. There's an excellent editorial by an author named Oliver Berkman about the perils of optimism in the workplace, and he also wrote an amazing book called The Antidote. So if you're interested in it, the book's been written. It's great.
Cool. I'll check it out. Thanks. So I've been doing a lot of introspection over the last couple of years because I was relentlessly optimistic and felt like I had to have this sort of persona of success, to be blunt about it, and that had to carry through in every aspect of my life. When as founders, entrepreneurs, even if you're not, things aren't always successful, but there's this pressure to project that, because especially if you're looking to raise money. The last thing I want to do is have a recorded session of me admitting that I experienced some depression, because then immediately that creates a hurdle in an investor's mind that, well, will that come back? Is that going to be detrimental to the business? Is it? And I tend to think now that the inverse is true, right? You want someone that's going to be honest about their shortcomings and their struggles, because then it's a known quantity, and you can address that head on. And I think one of the big challenges that just entrepreneurship in general faces is there's a lack of honesty, to your point about, optimism all the time around the struggles that, we go through. 33% of entrepreneurs will experience anxiety or depression, far greater than the average population. And so I think for me right now, the conversations I'm having with other entrepreneurs are very much aligned around like, what are my values? And when I come out of this, like, you have a lot of alone time, you have a lot of time to think, reset values, figure out what's important to you. There's this grand experiment of like working from home, and there's some, I'm learning to appreciate that, actually, like the ability to slow down and focus and really decide what I want to give my attention and time to. And then I'm a big fan of Brene Brown too. I've been reading her books lately and talking about vulnerability and the power of that, and really taking that in and sort of not just reading it and saying, oh, that's important, but acting it out and like being open with my team about what I've experienced in my life as it relates to mental health issues, not for sympathy, but just to normalize it. You know, I think that's the goal. It's not, I'm looking for people to feel bad for me or you know, whatever may come. It's more just like, this is part of what it is to be human, is you're going to experience this, just like someone's probably going to break a bone or you're going to get in a car accident. Those things are tangible and people are willing to talk about and discuss those things and fix them. Well, the same is true, in my opinion, of these mental health issues, where they may not be visible, but something is broken and needs fixing. And I can describe that in detail. I know what that feels like, just like I could describe a broken bone and could show you. So I think all that to say, yeah, the more vulnerable you can be, the stronger your team's going to be, the more you're going to be connected to your own values, and the more your company's going to reflect those values.
Cool. Anthony, anything to add?
The only thing I have to add is that I hope people do take this time to like make time to reflect, because I think we've been so go. Take the time, do that deep work that you avoid. Oftentimes, I think founders, we do the external work to avoid the internal work that we need to do, and realize like. I think just realize like every decision we're making it under the veil of a pandemic that eventually, from a pragmatic standpoint, states are going to open and the United States is going to get a second wave of corona or of infections. I mean, it's just, if you look at the wave where it started, China, South Korea, all these places, they've done what they need to do, but they were infected, and we're the most independently minded country in the world. So I think just looking at it from that standpoint, like, make your decisions, figure out what you want to do with your business, be real or don't be real. I mean, if you choose not to make any changes, you choose not to. But if you do, realize that they may be really good changes for you.
Yeah. Well, we're going to dive into some of the questions right now. We'll start with this one from Rick. In your opinion, how can startup support organizations like Pi and Build do a better job of supporting proper mental health practices for the founders we serve? Or to put it another way, how can we be a part of the solution rather than part of the problem? And Jason, go ahead. You've been involved or whoever.
No, I think just literally making it a topic of discussion, like this panel is a good example of acknowledging that mental health is something we should talk about and focus on. And I think organizations such as Pi or Built or others that are really there to serve founders, grow ecosystems, and provide support. I'm sort of the opinion that unless the founder's mind is healthy, the organization can't be healthy. Everything springs from that, in my view, not because I think founders are the most important thing, but truly how your mind operates, how you think about the world, how you think about your customers, your team, the policies you create, like that, the things you approve are a function of how you think, and the business is a reflection of who you are. And so if an organization such as Pi can really address that up front with early stage founders and sort of articulate, here are the things that you should be thinking about, not just finance and HR and all this sort of nuts and bolts of growing and running a business, but also personally, like, have you talked to your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend seriously about what this means and what this entails? Because it's a mental strain on them too. Like, that's going to test your relationship, and that will affect your business, how you operate. Just things like that are almost similar to like HR, finance, marketing. you could go down the list and check these boxes of psychological well-being. And then if, for example, if Pi brought in a therapist or a psychologist that specializes in work with founders and provided that as a free resource, maybe 1 or 2 meetings, and provided that founder with a profile of sort of the areas where they see there might need to be improvement as sort of a roadmap, similar to what we would do for a marketing plan or a business plan or an org chart, I think that would be new and extremely valuable. So in my mind, like, there's still that unaddressed quantity that is like mental health, and you have to bring in an expert to really address it. And the experts are there. I just don't think there's been a merger of those two worlds in an authentic, meaningful way.
Ciara, I know you do some of this, or a lot of this pregame. So maybe you can kind of chime in here on some of the stuff you've done, and then also what maybe some of the organizations like us can do. I think you're on mute.
Friday. I think if it boils down to one thing, and this is one of our pregame core values, it's tell the truth, right? So tell the truth about like what the entrepreneurship journey is like, because right now, like if I had a TED talk, it would be entrepreneurs are the new rock stars, right? Everyone wants to have a startup. Everyone wants it, and it's as though it's a very easy thing to do. And all they have to do is get funding and like, it'll all be great forevermore. And that's not what the journey is actually like. So I think especially when people are applying for like an incubator and they've never done it before, a great education you can give them is what it's like and how long it takes. Overnight success takes 10 years sometimes, right? And then tell the truth about the journeys. I think, when we do interviews at pregame of founders and established people, I always like dig into the questions about those moments. And it's like, if I could listen to that podcast, how I built this, and expand one moment, it would be like from going to idea to like when they actually were making revenue, which could have been many years. And this comes from, I was listening to Alexis Ohanian speak at the second annual WeWork summer camp. And he was just like, oh yeah, we just totally bootstrapped and it was like so hard. And we just ate ramen for a year and just built Reddit. And I'm just sitting there going, but someone had to pay for that year that you weren't making any money. So like, the thing, tell the truth about what it actually takes to get there, because it's not just, I got to like, do you see what I'm saying? Like there's something disingenuous about just like, I worked really hard and then I was successful. Like, I will tell you from working with hundreds of founders, like most of them have family money and they're not making a lot of revenue, or they're not making enough to live off of. And if that was more known, I think people wouldn't compare themselves to other people and think they're doing a bad job. And I'm not saying that's the only way you can be successful. Stephen talks about social capital all the time. It's so important. But if we knew what was really going on behind the scenes more, and like what people's path to success really was, and ask some of those hard questions and not just the Cinderella questions, I think that people wouldn't compare themselves to their Instagram, competitors, and they would have a more realistic view of the ups and downs.
Anthony, how about you?
So I'm new to Portland as of November-ish, because I was here in November and then I really moved here in December. But I think the same can be said for any startup ecosystem in the country, and for that part in most parts of the world. It's when it comes to the ecosystems, the truth definitely, and money. Put real money behind things to support the mental health. Whether it's subsidizing therapists, psychologists, executive coaching. If you're a local-based organization, then you should have those relationships with folks that you can be able to figure out. You can figure out the financial component, because the ultimate goal is to help the founders either figure out if they want to like move forward or not. But I see like on the one part of the ecosystem, when you see a lot of investors talk about, yeah, we support our founders and or our entrepreneurs, and you're like, how? And I've only seen a handful of VCs that put money, part of their money, into the mental health and executive coaching and things of that nature for their entrepreneurs. And then even then, the step further, if you really want to be ahead of the curve, put money in, give the coaching, and help give them guidance on the steps they should be doing. Like, especially when you think of like people of color looking for a therapist, less than 10% of therapists are a person of color. So that means you're going to go through a lot of therapists. And you do that even if you weren't a person of color. So it's helping people understand that process, and being like a key kind of pillar of the ecosystem, going back to, because I used to be in economic development too. So understanding that you have connections that entrepreneurs, it would take years for them to do. So leverage those connections to do this, to help them with these resources and understand how to use the resources. Because otherwise it's like putting a person in a car and you don't know how to drive a car unless somebody tells you and gives you some gas.
Yeah.
One note, Mitch. I think something that I want to expand on a little bit that Anthony brought up is just the access to a therapist. Like, it is a hard thing to get to an actual therapist that has an opening, and just like the process of finding one that has time, and that it's like I don't know, some impossible journey. And if you're in a spot where you're having mental challenges, you're experiencing anxiety or depression, if you're getting rejected by therapists because they don't have time or they don't have openings, like, that just compounds it. So it was really hard for me to find a therapist, really hard. And I'm lucky in that I have, I think, a good amount of resources. But for someone who's just starting out, trying to start a company that doesn't have health insurance, that maybe an organization could help take that on. If it's simply just we have this subset of therapists that are willing and able to address the specific needs that this group has, and they have availability, I think that actually would be a huge step forward. So.
Yeah, I think it's like one of those. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, this is just a point where I would like to shout out the pregame model, because I mean, the last time I hit burnout, like, of the 3 times since pregame started, and I was at this low, I like went back to my therapist and she was like confounded. She's like, I can't help you. You need like a business coach or strategist. She's like, you need you. And I'm like, I know, that's why it's so hard. And so, like, we have a lot of personal development programming and like guest speakers, and the format, part of the pregame format, is actually modeled on a psychological recovery format of small groups sharing in a structured way for an hour. And like, in my life and emotional and spiritual and mental health journey of all the things I've been through, sharing in person with others in a space that is a safe space has been the most conducive to my health and healing. And my dad was an entrepreneur that struggled through many years of failed startups, and that was so much of a motivator for starting pregame. Like, the highest compliment a client can give me is that they got to spend more time with their kid on the weekend. Like, that's the real goal, right? Is to have a life as well. So all that said, part of our model is based on, like, it almost doesn't matter what we talk about, just that everyone feels like safe, held, listened to in person. I'm concerned a little bit about the Zoom thing, because there's this article in the New York Times last week about how like the video compresses and we can't see each other's like micro expressions that help us interpret each other. And so we're spending a lot more time processing in our subconscious, like what the other person means. So we're not getting the same mental health benefit as being in person with people, or even the phone, because we're more used to the phone. So these are the things I think about as I think about how our model should repurpose, for COVID and post-COVID.
Yeah.
I just want to say one quick. Oh, my feedback. You made me think of one quick thing I've done is I've actually started to schedule like less Zooms, or if there's a webinar. Most webinars are recorded, so sign up for whatever webinar you want or whatever thing, and then just I don't know, file them away, and then you can like watch them all in order. And I know some operational things for business, but there's ways to, like, I don't know, game the system to a certain extent. But you're right that you made me think of that when you were talking about the fatigue. So
yeah. Before we go on to the next question, I think it's one of those things where it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out, because mental health in the U.S. was hanging on by a thread anyways, and this is just going to be like extrapolate. It's going to lay bare all the gaps, because there's going to be millions and millions of people that are going to need help. And to Jason's point, I think it's going to be really hard to find that help. So hopefully we can do something about that. And that kind of brings us to the next question. Many founders are not sleeping well, trying to figure out how to keep their biz from closing. How can they hit the pause button? Anthony, I'll start with you.
I think the first thing is, I see you, I hear you, I understand, on all levels, right? It's you're trying to run a business, and then especially when it comes to like small businesses, even our own Congress is kind of like giving us the shaft on being able to get funding, like in the wording and keeping us out of getting funding, which that's a challenge. And then trying to figure out how to like grow your business or sustain it. I think one of the things is you just have to make time. And I know it's easier said than done. And these are like practices, right? So the whole art of getting yourself into the discipline of sleeping more. The other thing is to look to connect with, making sure that if you're making calls and connecting with people, connecting with your other like entrepreneurs. Like that's one of the things that the first things I did was make sure I like have their number, not a tweet, not a DM on a social, but like the actual phone number of your fellow entrepreneurs. And then I think not watching as much as the doom and gloom of that tries to be put out there, because we are in a fear-based media society. So try to limit that. And I think the last thing is looking at, when it comes to your other entrepreneurs, like the good things that they're doing, like here locally, Erica Escalante with Aero Coffee or Cafe Reina.
Good catch.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah. And she brilliantly, like I was like one of my side hustles was a Manny for Erica when I, first moved here, and I saw her go through the iterations of trying to figure out how to like reshape her coffee business. And now she's doing things that a coffee shop isn't supposed to do technically, or according to whoever says what we're supposed to do. So realize that we have a blank slate to make messy mistakes. And so all of this kind of combined, I think those things can give your mind some sense of ease. And then you can only control what you can control. I mean, and then understanding that good sleep is important to better decision making.
Yeah. CR, anything to add to that? How to hit the pause? Good. Jason, are you chasing a dog back there?
I was, yes. I was going to introduce Mochi really quick, but she took up. So, yeah, this is another area. Like, I think zooming out again, as far as like what equates to mental health, sleep is a big component of that, and it's all really like additive. There's not just like one. I think, like Anthony said, there's no like quick, now you're better. It's like you have better sleep, you have better like healthier eating habits. You're mentally able to separate from like negative thought patterns, and all of that takes time to learn. Sleep in particular, I studied like crazy, honestly, like again 2 years ago, because I was not sleeping either, and I wake up and just feel like I didn't sleep at all. So a few things I did, I got blackout curtains, just very tactical things, like have a cool dark room. That helps big time. Stop looking at screens. Most of us are addicted to looking at screens, so like stop hours ahead of your bedtime. Don't look at it. And if you have to, put on that night shift mode on your phone, which turns it kind of yellow. But there's studies that show like blue light, and a plug for Visionary Lenses, or for our lens company. We're gonna blue light lenses here, blue light blocking. Now that's still sort of a theory that blue light from our phones and our screens are causing issues. But now more than ever, right? This may be in person normally, but now I'm looking at a screen. I'm spending 8 to 9 hours a day looking at a screen. So that's going to affect your circadian rhythm just from a biological standpoint. Work out, like work yourself out. Get out there and run so you can't run anymore, and you'll sleep better. What else? There's melatonin, which is a natural sleep aid. You'll feel groggier in the morning, but it'll put you to sleep without the use of prescription drugs. Tea helps me too. There's like bedtime tea. You can just brew it up, and all those things, again, in aggregate, you don't know exactly what will be the trigger for you, but those are some of the ways you can start to like work towards a better night's sleep.
Cool. Going to move on, try and get through some of these questions before our time's up. Oh, there's Ciara's little, you're going to be like the Godfather. You're just going to pet your rabbit while we're talking. Just how can founders prepare themselves to have a conversation with an employee they need to let go? And I'm just going to add on, how can founders or leaders, like I'm not going to say founder, but like a leader of a company, build in necessary support from a mental health standpoint of their employees themselves? Like what processes or steps should they be taking to kind of build that trust within their organization? Whoever would like to go first. Anthony, Jason, Ciara?
Well, so the original question here, let me just look.
How do you prepare yourself to have the conversation about letting someone
go? It's never easy. First of all, like as soon as it becomes easy, you should probably get out of being a CEO. I'm just being honest. Like I think it's, sometimes it is easier because they've clearly violated your values or policies. And so it's just a cut and dry thing. I'm going to assume this question is related to having to lay people off, like the current situation. That is incredibly hard, especially if you're resource constrained and you can't really provide a tangible sort of off-ramp for people to land on their feet. The good news is that obviously unemployment is pretty solid right now. You get, I think, an extra $600 a week. But to prepare yourself here, I think that's, again, prepare themselves. I tend to, I guess you just have to outline, you have a script, you're straightforward, you just say, I'll run you through how I would do it, I guess. Just, you sit people down and say, the reason we're having this meeting today is that we have to make some changes. We have to downsize because, revenue, if you have some facts, if you can share, like we're down 30%. COVID's hit us hard, as you know, and it's hit a lot of businesses hard. This is really an unprecedented time. And unfortunately, we had to rework our strategy, and our new strategy means that this position is no longer a position we need at this time, or something like, I don't know exactly the circumstance, but I like to always, if I can, tie it back into where the company is headed and why this role is no longer, either we can't support the role financially, the capital structure has changed because of, the economics of the business, or our strategy has shifted. And I've done both, and typically the earlier the better. The earlier you can do it, the more transparent you can be about why. Again, it's very circumstantial, but trying to say, I think, actually, here's what I'm going to point you to. The CEO of Airbnb just laid off 1,200 people, I think, somewhere around there, just a massive number of people. And he wrote the most incredible letter to his workforce that I read yesterday. And it was a formula that I think any founder can use when they're having to let people go, or any CEO, just acknowledging the current situation, recognizing that this is not the fault of the individual, that they contributed to the company and that contribution will live on. Because I think a lot of people, when they're let go, take it very personally. And if you can release them from that and say, it's really circumstantial, like the business can't support it, and then help them find a new place and tell them, any business is going to be lucky to have you. I'm going to work with you to make that happen. You can give up your time right now as a CEO or a founder, and that's valuable too, in the form of like recommendations or connecting them to other businesses. So
cool.
I'll land by.
Ciara, you want to
I
add
have a
something?
question for Jason. Yeah, Jason, I'm curious, like, for people who are actually underperforming, do you think it's more kind to say like, hey, things have just changed, or it's more kind to tell them exactly why?
Yeah, again, it depends on the person. I have a team of 35, and I know each one of them fairly well. I think, as long as I know some of their family members' names, I feel like we're still pretty close. We haven't grown to the size where it's not like I don't know personal details about each person. So I can kind of gauge like, how are they going to take information? How are they going to react? Is this going to be beneficial or not? But I guess from a performance standpoint, I'm always a fan of like real-time, very direct feedback. And if it's a policy violation, there's just certain things that it's like, you're done, you're out, right? If you're stealing, if you're blah, blah, blah. There are things where we escalate. So if you've, say you're, I don't know, you can get any number of circumstances, but there's an escalation, verbal warning, performance improvement plan. And then it's simply like, hey, this just isn't working out for you or the company. And you're not going to be happy here because you can't meet the requirements we have. So it's going to be an ongoing struggle for you. And the company isn't getting what it needs from you. And so I've had those very direct conversations, and the more recent ones have gone well, I think in part because of the level of transparency. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I think there's,
Yeah. It's always sort of a dynamic target, but if I can be straightforward, if I can be transparent, and really the idea is too, they're going to go on to something new. And if there's some big issue that like they're not aware of, they should be aware of it. First of all, if they're at Revent, they will be aware of it because our managers know like you need to be very like real time and straightforward. But you're going to serve them better. Maybe they won't recognize it right away, but later in life, they'll be like, I'm super happy they told me that, this is an issue. At least I tell myself that. It's true.
Anthony, I'm going to go to you, but I'm going to did we lose Anthony? Maybe I won't go to him. Still got Jason and Ciara. So I'll go to Ciara. How can leaders lay the foundation for transparent discussions about mental health and help people feel safe sharing their stories and needs?
I think it's tricky. I think I'm curious to see if the trend of vulnerability is a trend or a permanent shift. I know we're all big Brene Brown fans, but I don't know if this is a moment or if it's permanent. Because Americans really like putting things on pedestals, and we're all perfectionists to a degree. So it'll be interesting. I'm not convinced yet that it's a permanent change. At least certainly not in my industry. So, of course, as Brene has taught us, like the best way to create a space for conversation is to be more forthcoming about your own situation and to show your own vulnerabilities. And sometimes you have to set ground rules. Like we have some ground rules in like our pregame groups about, not having your phone out, not having your computer out, people's attention being there. We have a physical space that helps a lot. So, we can see each other. But yeah, I think it's, modeling the behavior. The other side of this question is like how much of that stuff should happen in the workplace. Like from a society standpoint, I don't think healthcare should be tied to work. And I don't think that a lot of the stuff we do at work, like the movement of like mindfulness at work and workplace like wellness is a little suspect if you ask me, because I think like really we should just have really great work conditions so we could go do those things on our own time and have healthcare like that's not dependent on employment. So I get a little bit like side eye about some of those things. So that's food for thought.
Anthony, I'll go to you for that question. Since I lost you as I was asking you the question.
And what was the question? I'm sorry.
It's how can leaders, company, community lay the foundation for transparent discussions about mental health and help people feel safe sharing their stories and needs?
You know, I think it's I think part of that foundation is not trying to do something because it's the best practice, but because it's like the thing to do for your company. Like there's a lot of companies that talk about transparency, but oftentimes it only comes up, like we're talking in the previous question, when it comes to, letting somebody go. Oh, we got to tell you about the story. But did you ever have any like AMAs or ask me anything with your team on a regular basis so they understand what's going on with the business, so something doesn't come out of the blue? It's I think doing the work as a leader, to be grounded. So when you are having conversations with folks, and for example, if you want to have a safe space and real conversations, well, as the leader, you're going to hear some shit that you probably don't want to hear. So you need to be ready for that. And so I think it's just, I'm probably just adding to what the other folks have said, but there's no silver bullet. There's no best practice. You got to experiment and find out what works with you. And I always kind of default to the no, don't be an asshole rule. And we hold people like Steve Jobs, or even like most recently, everyone talks about Michael Jordan, the championships and all this. And I'm like, you can be a kind person and have run a great business and be kind. It doesn't have to be what Fast Company and Business Insider and Wall Street Journal and blah, 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 blah says. Go back to fifth grade. How do you be nice in fifth grade? Go talk to it. In fact, go talk to a teacher and figure out how they make classrooms go,
Yeah. I'm just going to be mindful of the time. We probably have like 8 to 10 minutes left. One thing I don't want to forget to ask all of you is, two things. Like, how can we help you? How can the community help each one of you right now? Because I think that a lot of times all of you are on shows, panels, discussions, talking about this stuff and talking about how you provide help for other founders. So I want to give a space to say, what can the community or what can we do for each one of you? And then kind of some parting, like maybe a last parting advice that you kind of want to give to folks. Ciara, you want to start?
I'm trying to narrow it down. Just tell me I'm doing a good job if you see me doing a thing. I definitely I'm very sensitive and I get thrown off really easily. Like a potential customer sent like a passive aggressive email to me about kind of insulting my company last night. And then I had like a tummy ache all night long. I'm like, if people knew what that effect those things had on us, maybe they wouldn't do it. I don't know. I don't leave negative reviews for businesses for that reason. But yeah, I need affirmation. I need validation just like anybody else. And I need business too. So that's always it. So amplifying, everyone on this call that I recognize is pretty great about the retweets and the amplifications, but I need people to show up as well. So, yeah.
Cool. Anthony, how about you?
Okay. I'll start with I think the parting advice. Is that, are we on parting advice too? Or doing both of them, or doing?
Yeah, we can go back to that, but it's also how can we help you?
Okay. How can you help me? So last year, did the research and published the Founder Mental Wealth Report. Getting ready to launch the research part of the 2020 version, and it'll be for the US, UK, and EU, specifically for underestimated founders. So you can help me when you start to see me promote that to amplify it, but also looking for sponsors as well as individual contributors to help underwrite the report. Yeah.
Parting piece of advice. I'll come back to Ciara. Yeah. Go ahead. Parting piece of advice, Anthony.
Oh, okay. Parting piece of advice. I'd say I go back to the three contexts that we've lived through a pre-COVID world, we're living in a COVID world, and we're going to live in all things going good. We're going to live in a post-COVID world. So as you make decisions, realize you're trying to work through those three different contexts we're living in. And even more so, your subconscious is working like more than overtime to try to figure all this shit out. So give yourself some grace, some compassion, sleep, and treats whenever you need.
Treats. Nice. Ciara, I'll go back to you for your parting piece of advice, and I'll hit Jason up.
Yeah, I think my big thing with everything, because we focus on goal setting, is be honest with yourself about what you really want. Because I think when we're working towards something that's not really what we want, we sabotage it and we become an asshole to the people around us. And so I just went over to find the link. I have a worksheet because that's what I'm about. So this is a worksheet that you can do that has like questions to help you understand what you really want.
Cool. Jason, how can the community help you?
Clean up here. Well, we need people to help package lenses. So if you want, seriously though, we're hiring seasonal workers to package. We are very, we exceed sort of standards set by the CDC in our manufacturing area. So, we've set that up in a way that's very safe, but we are hiring a full stack developer. We've again, sort of repositioned our business strategy and accelerated certain areas of the business to address the current state of things. So just if you know anyone that is a full stack developer or would be interested in working seasonally in production, our busy season is through the summer. So great perks, great place to work. And then my parting piece of advice, I think similar to Anthony's, people are very hard on themselves. You're harder on yourself than anyone else is. Just hearing Ciara talk too, I've watched some of your videos and I was really impressed when I first watched them. I'm impressed with both of you as individuals and your vulnerability to even get on this panel. But again, we're so self-critical that I think it's, especially during this time, just ease up and, like I said, maybe watch some Netflix, go on a walk, get outside. I'm really passionate about the outdoors being a reset too. So 2 days in the outdoors, now the parks are opening up, wear your mask, but take the time to get off your couch, get out there. Even though the thought of it can sometimes be like, I don't want to move. Once you get out, start moving, get out into nature, you will feel that reset. I can't quite quantify it. I don't know why necessarily, but it's scientifically proven to work. So give yourself that luxury and that break, because you'll come back to whatever you're working on or whoever you're with in a much better frame of mind.
Cool. And I will probably Rick drop it in there, but a plug for 2 years ago at our summit, our festival, Jason and Emma from Wildfang did a talk called the Emergency Beer Club. That was basically how to build those trusting relationships with peers where you can be vulnerable. And it was a really, really good talk. So
Thanks.
And then my last piece of advice is something I've just started doing this week is I carve out 5 to 10 minutes every day and email 3 to 5 people, whether they're business owners, family, friends, whoever, and just say, how you doing? Just checking on you. Let me know if you can do anything. And I will say that it's always impressive to see how everybody is in the same boat. Yeah. Everybody's responding, feeling alone, and they're appreciative of getting just a note, as simple as that is. So that's my parting advice. Just email some people, reach out. And that's all we have here. I'm not going to have, it's Friday. I know everybody's going to be fading. The sun's actually shining. So to Jason's point and everybody's point, get outside and enjoy it because I think it's great. It's a rainy weekend. So
yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much for doing this.
Hey, if you had any other follow-up questions too, I know there were a few that were unaddressed. Feel free to email me. It's jb@revantoptics.com. I'm sure the other people on this panel too would be kind of happy to actually send some responses over. So might not be right away, but I know there's some important questions there that we weren't able to address during the time we had. So yeah, thank you, Mitch.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.